lachan, chachole na'am ya'o, layom kome lagad, che mashpete la'asab go'em, lakabatse mamlachot lashapach, galeham zaime cha charon ape, che ba'ash kan athe tha'achal chal ha'aratz, che az apach al gamem shapabo rora, lakar chalam basham ya'o, lagabaro shacham achad. I just read from the prophet Sapan Ya'o, aka Zephaniah, chapter 3, verses 8 and 9, two very often cited but very misunderstood verses and almost always taken out of context. Here is the familiar Queen James translation of these two verses. Therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. Now, I don't know if you were able to detect the disdain in my voice as I read that. Let me explain why. I call the above the Queen James Version because Queen Elizabeth II, the descendant of King James, is the copyright owner of this book. She gets paid off of every single copy printed and sold within the United Kingdom, and no copy can be printed and published within the United Kingdom without Her Majesty's royal say-so. So, in my sarcasm, I call it the Queen James Version. It has nothing to do with the sexual orientation of King James, although I wouldn't be surprised. It also has nothing to do with the skin color of King James. Black or white, he was not my people. The curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28 did not take a vacation in 17th century Europe. So if you were a black person sitting on a throne and ruling over a kingdom in Europe, you were a black heathen and not the bloodline of Ya'o Shar'al, which was cursed to remain at the bottom of the barrel of every social ladder in every land of their dispersal outside of their own promised land. On the other hand, it has everything to do with my disgust for the English language of my people's former slave masters. So I've explained my disdain, but the question is this translation made 410 years ago in 1611, is it accurate? And the answer is no, not completely. And I don't want almost accurate. I'm not satisfied with close. Here is the corrected rendering. Therefore long for me, says Yahweh, for the day I rise to the prey. For my judgment is to gather peoples, to assemble kingdoms, to pour out upon them my indignation, all the fierceness of my wrath. For in the fire of my jealousy it will be devoured all the earth. For that being so, I will turn to the heathens the pure language, to call all of them upon the name Yahweh, to serve him one shoulder. That is the literal word-for-word rendering of the source language into the unclean heathen English tongue. So what's wrong with the 1611 Queen James Version? For one, it takes the plural noun gamem and translates it as people. It is actually the word for heathen nations that will become servants in the kingdom according to Yeshayahu chapter 49 verses 22 and 23, where the exact same word is used. The Queen James Version also takes the demonstrative adverb particle as and renders it as then, which gives the false impression that the knowledge of the pure language is restricted to a future time. The obvious problem with that, of course, is that the men King James commissioned to make this translation in 1611 had to possess knowledge of the pure language in order to do so. In other words, that knowledge is already here. We don't have to wait until the end of the world in order to access it. If I'm wrong, and if these words mean what the illiterate street performing camps teach, which is that no one can know the pure language until the end of the world, then it shouldn't have been possible for a translation to be made in the year 1611. It shouldn't be possible for me to correct that mistranslation 410 years later and pronounce these words, reading them out loud fluently because I am fluent, and knowing exactly what I'm saying, but I just did. And so can you, if you want to. It shouldn't be possible for me to fully comprehend every single word I just read and be able to break down each word and account for all aspects of the grammar, syntax, and morphology but I can, and so can you if you want to. If you cannot see the idiocy of this circular argument, that the pure language is out of reach until the end of the world, something is incredibly wrong with your brain. So now, let's call it what it really is.
When the master gives you something, you take it. He gave you a name. It's a nice name. It's Toby. And it's going to be yours till the day you die.
The notion that no one can know the language that the Holy Prophet spoke until the end of the world is nothing more than an excuse, on the part of my people at least, an excuse to remain a slave. It is an excuse in order to avoid putting in the work to relearn the ancestors' tongue. It is also a method to deter and to prevent others from wanting to learn the language, because the agenda is to keep you as ignorant and as illiterate as they are. A true teacher's goal must be to teach his students how to read the source language, empowering them with enough information so that they do not need him anymore. They can read and understand the source language for themselves on their own. If your teacher is not doing that, he is wasting your time. Or if he is doing that, but his goal is to turn you away from Yahweh and to turn you off from keeping the covenant, then he is worse than a blue-eyed white devil, and you can tell him I said so. Give this man his language back. Give him his English back, his German, his French, his Spanish, his Portuguese, his Dutch, his Italian, his Swedish, his Danish, his Arabic. Give it back. The only reason you, my people, speak these languages as your mother tongue, the only reason you give your children his names is because you were his slaves. By you continuing to speak his language, you only demonstrate how successfully enslaved you were, to the point that even now, when you are supposedly free, you cling to this man's language for dear life. You cannot even imagine a world without him or his language. His culture, his value system, his morality, his worldview, his God are all rooted in and spring from his language. You are still his slave until you give him his language back. Your name is Toby until the day you die. Think about it. You are in the churches praising and worshiping this man's God in this man's language. And of course, you cannot see the problem with that because you've been indoctrinated. It's time to unindoctrinate yourself. In the kingdom, the servants will only speak the language of their masters. Just like during slavery in America, my people had to speak the language of their slave owners, the language I'm speaking now. But I'm only speaking it now because if I were to speak in the pure language in this video, most of you would not understand what I'm saying. So I am forced to use this unclean language, this heathen tongue, in order to get the message across to you, my people. This is the message. Shabo la eish hazah shapafotama. Wa chazaro al shapafcha shapaboroa la abatheno. Rak shapaf sor ano. Ho chalol gam shamo. Che shamo shapaborora. Shamo ya'o. He galam ya'egalam. Now what did I say? Give this man his filthy language back and return to your own language, the pure language of our ancestors, the language of our rock. It starts with his name because his name is the pure language. His name is Yahweh, always has been, always will be.